Hi guys, today is the 6th of February 2020. The light's changing. Right, okay, fine. I hope it's not too bright. I won't know until I've actually filmed this video if the light's okay, but we are doing a channeling, so sometimes that can affect the light. Sorry. Today's channeling is with Emily Bronte. The connections between myself and Emily are as follows, and I may forget some. I have the same birthday as Branwell Bronte, obviously not the same year. Before I met Gary, well, Gary all his life has had the nickname Mr. Bronte because of all the books he's read. He's a bookworm like myself. We got engaged in Pondon Hall, which was where Wuthering Heights was based, Emily Bronte, and all the Brontes used to go regularly to stay at Pondon Hall. It's very close to, it is in Haworth, and it's very close to the Parsonage. The Cathy room, which is where she based the Cathy room, the Cathy window, you know, Heathcliffe let me in at your window, the window where she puts her hand through the ghost of Cathy. We stayed in that room with the box bed. That's where I got engaged to Gary. We'd been out for a meal, we came back into the room, and Gary went, "There's something knocking at the window." I didn't do any of this work by then, I was a dental nurse, so I was like that. Anyway, go look at the window, Claire, go look at the window, there's somebody tapping at the window. So I thought, oh, we'll have to have a look. So I opened the wooden, it was one of those big old-fashioned wooden beds, opened the wooden shutters to the bed, and in that was the window where she based that scene on, and it was a Bible, Cathy's Bible, was my engagement ring. Turned around and Gary proposed. So yes, so there's that. Always loved Haworth, right from being a child. I'm just trying to think of something else. Oh yeah, always had a bond there. Live in West Yorkshire, live in Yorkshire, which is very close to where the Brontes lived. And bookworm myself, creator. They were a creator of the day. So anyway, this started off on, I think it was Wednesday. I'm actually reading a book about Charlotte at the minute. The later stages of her life once the siblings have gone. And I was sat on my bike reading. I thought, God, I'd love to channel Charlotte. And straight away Emily came in and I was like, oh, okay. And I was thinking, that's a bit strange, isn't it? Because Emily was meant to be quite different from the others. And I was like, oh yeah. And then I got, yeah, well, it's near to Valentine's Day, and she wrote one of the most, I think personally, the most famous love story of all time, Heathcliffe and Cathy, Wuthering Heights. So I got a message about that, and she's very different in as far as, before I go any further, I'm going to put a disclaimer on this as well, because she's an old soul from a very different time. So anything that's said that's a little bit controversial, because I think she's going to talk about disease, she's going to talk about isolation, she's going to talk about jabs and stuff, and because on her deathbed she refused a doctor. So it could get controversial, this video. So anything that is said is nothing to do with medical advice. You are still responsible for yourself. There's an absolute breeze. I'm just checking my window. My window's not open. My vent's closed. There's a breeze. This is I'm praying that you guys can feel this as well. So anyway, I've sensed her on and off since Wednesday, and I'm like, I'm not going to do a video because she's very protective of her space, very protective of her space. I mean, some of the stuff I've briefly read on it, very briefly, and some of it I knew anyway, was that she sometimes she couldn't even speak in public. She was immensely private, immensely private. So I didn't actually want to do a video because I thought I was intrusive. Anyway, today I came upstairs to literally do some quick instas, and it was as though she picked me up. She didn't physically pick me up. It wasn't anything like possession. It was just I was there, and it was like I was there. It was like she placed me in the Bronte times, and I was like, God, she's here. So I went to the toilet. Too much information. So I'm sat on the loo, and literally it was howling the wind through here. This house is quite secure, touch wood, fingers crossed. This house is quite secure for weather, although it's a wartime house. And it was howling, absolutely. And the rain came, the birds started singing. I've never known it. And I was stood on the toilet, well, not stood on the toilet, obviously sat on the loo. And I was like, she's here. She's here. And I just got the information, just do the video. And she's very, very different as far as she's very forthright. I asked her what cards she wanted me to use. She said none. She doesn't want to use cards. She doesn't want to use incense because she doesn't like smoke, apparently. This is stuff that I'm picking up off her energetically and stuff that she's saying. She was born on a portal 1818, so she's portal energies. Some of the stuff, because this video could be quite different from other channelings, but I will describe where she's sat now. When I opened up and I asked my chief to bring her in to make sure it's all safe, that it's only Emily we're speaking to, nobody else, no imposter energies. She asked to go to Penistone Crag, which is where she based, another place where she based Wuthering Heights on. So she's sat at the minute at Penistone Crag in Haworth. So close your eyes and visualise her. She's sat there. There's no cap on. Her hair's probably my colour, maybe a bit darker. Very, very much like mine, but longer and more slightly damp as well, like you've been out in the wind. She's very grounded, very earthly. Very earthy. She belongs, like I want to say, she belongs in the ground. She's got like, I'm rubbish at describing stuff, like a creamy, browny, coarse dress, long dress on down to the ground. I want to say like clog type shoes and like an apron or something white there. Her sleeves are rolled up like she's been, because she did do a lot of housework. So she's sat there. And it's just amazing. Then obviously when I started to connect, the light started flickering. The wind came round with the light flickered, so she's very much like, I want to say Cathy, very much like Cathy. So, have I covered everything? One of the things she has described as well is for writers, is that there are portals for writers, but not just for writers, for creators. There are portals that writers unknowingly can tap into. She said because when they were at the parsonage is opposite or next to a grave, I think it's next to a graveyard, and she said they were quite obsessed with death because they were surrounded by death. Their dad was the parsonage, the vicar, and there were dead bodies and death and funeral on their doorstep, so they became obsessed. She said they had access to both, if you know about the little books they used to do with Branwell Bronte when they were children, those little miniatures with the world that they used to escape into. And she said it was like they were accessing spirit. It wouldn't surprise me if there wasn't two people in that graveyard that represented Heathcliffe and Cathy, but it's like they could connect into to bodies. It's quite heavy stuff, connecting to the spirit of the bodies in the ground that were surrounding them. Haworth as well is very mystical. It's known for witchcraft and, I wanted to say pagan stuff and dark stuff, and it's quite mysterious up on those motions, so it's quite easy for them to tap into stuff. She did say the other day to tap into stuff like demon energy and the darkness, which is where some of the darkness comes from in their books. She did say that when people are writing, and I have sensed this in books that I've, not all books, but especially historical books and like Harry Potter, where they're actually channeling stuff that's coming through. So it could be stuff from source, it could be stuff from people that have passed. You've ever been reading a book and it just feels so real? She says they were doing that. It's like a channeling, but they were doing it unknown. They were doing it unknown. They were tapping in to people that had gone. Take some water. Tapping into too much. She's saying that there was so much darkness around. She said when she's watching people visiting the parsonage now, it's all and it's all excitement and intrigue and fun. She said, but what people don't realise is how dark it was, that we were absorbing that darkness into our soul. She said many people are saying that we were dark people, especially me, to write those books, to write about Heathcliff being so dark, but I was not dark. It was the world around me which was dark, that I was absorbing into me, that came through, down through my arm, into my pen and onto paper. We were absorbing the darkness and it was coming through us. How we got rid of the darkness that we absorbed was to invite it in and to release it into paper. Because if we'd have kept absorbing that darkness, we would have gone, I feel as though she's saying we could have ended up being, what's the word? Mental institution. I've put disclaimers on that. I know that's not a very PC word, but it's like a lunatic asylum, a lunatic. It could have tipped them over to lunacy, so they had to release that through pen and through paper, through quill and through paper. So it's like, it's strange to watch people getting such joy from the parsonage, because it was such a dark place at times. For although them in the house together as a family, there were many joyous times, it was still, there was a lot of darkness, a lot of death, a lot of illness. She's saying, especially when they're looking down now into the world with this virus, she said, we were used to living amongst viruses and filth and dirt and disease. She's showing me constantly washing hands as well, so I'm not, I mean, obviously I don't know that much about, I've only read basics, but it's like she's constantly washing her hands as well, because I do know that she did a lot of the domestic stuff in there, so she's constantly washing her hands, something that Patrick taught them, to constantly wash the hands, and it's like a carbolic soap that used to make the hands sore, so it's washing the hands, carbolic soap. So it was a release. It feels slightly dizzy. Anybody else feeling that kind of dizziness? Slightly dizzy. So portals for books. You said without even knowing it, you're tapping into what's called the akashic records, where things have already happened and you're tapping into them as a writer. And she said it's going to become more and more easier to write, because as we awaken and ascend, more people are going to become creative. She said out of the situation that we're in, out of lockdown now, people become more and more creative. Do you want to talk about isolation? Because she talks about isolation the other day, about the gift of isolation. Being isolated on the moors, had they, again, she's saying that health was very different to what it is today. There was less houses, less people, so you really were isolated. You literally came out the back door up onto the moors and straight up and ran up onto the moors. It was bleak, it was isolated, but it was passionate, but they were safe there. For although it was dark and heavy and some tragically sad times, it was home and they actually felt safe there. But she's saying because they were cut off from everybody else, as most families were back then, people were creative. You had the chance to be creative, you had the chance, there were no tellies, radio, there was no distractions, social media, so you could spend the day writing a book, constantly writing, or stitching, or painting, or tapestry. That she's saying that there are so many people that are realising and getting to know their creative flair during these times. And she said comfort can be found in being creative. That wind's coming again. I don't know if people can see stuff on the camera like orbs and stuff, or but there's a wind coming down around me like that. Very gently, she's very gentle. That there's creativity to be found in lockdown. She said isolation was a blessing to them because they struggled with the outside world. She said they would have actually thrived living during this time because they didn't require other people, they just required themselves and the ghosts, the spirits, and she's also saying the demons, Branwell and his demons, the demon drink, that's Branwell. Right, she's saying she is watching how people go through these times. She said there are many that are doing what Branwell did, that are feeling too isolated, that are feeling too raw and too open. She said they could control that feeling within them, but Branwell struggled with the rawness of being, because she said in isolation, she's right, that's it, thank you for explaining that. In isolation, when you're kept away from other people, you are open raw to yourself. She said we had ways to deal with that, but Branwell turned to drink to hide that rawness within himself, the demon within himself, his own personal demon, so he hid in drink. She's saying for those going through these times, please be mindful of that. Be aware of the demon drink, be aware of the drugs, because he took opium, be aware of escapism. She said escapism through craft, through writing, diaries, journaling, walking, fresh air, exercise, the ground, the moors, heather, the rain, the snow, the wind. Don't go down the way of Branwell. She said let him be an example. I'm feeling quite emotional. Let him, there's wind coming, so I'm not sure if you can see anything on the camera. Let him be an example of what not to do. Saying, let our blessed Branwell show the world how not to behave. Absolutely gone cold. She said, go into creation. She said, because within all of us is a writer, a painter, an artist, a singer, a crafter, a reader, a listener. The power of prayer as well. Power of meditation. Some more water. Checking the camera still on. You mentioned the other day about doctors and about health and about your own death and about not wanting interference from that. What would you recommend people to do now? She said it's important that people do what they want to do. Nobody has the right to tell somebody to do something. If you want a doctor, have a doctor. If you don't, don't. If you want medication, take medication. If you don't, don't. She says too many people interfere in telling us how to live our lives, especially when it comes to our health. But ultimately, only we know our own true health and what our body will take and accept and reject. It is not for others to tell us what we should do, but for ourselves to tell us, to guide us, our inner self. Follow your own inner voice. But don't judge others for their decisions. Don't judge others for their decisions. Support each other. Yeah, that rain. I don't think the microphone's that good on here, but the wind and the rain at the minute just like whew. Can you feel those energies? Keep checking the camera. You were talking the other day about how history has portrayed you women, and Branwell. Are you happy with that? No, because they don't understand us truly. Manipulations. People are trampling all over the house and trampling all over the books, and the people that are taking great joy and being respectful, there's people that are trampling in and they're trampling in and they're trampling the moors, they're trampling my moors, they're going into my moors, my land, wanting a piece of me, wanting a piece of Heathcliff. It's Cathy, but they're mine. Heathcliff is within us all, and so is Cathy. That people need to learn that that is within us all. but when they go into the moors, the wildness comes out. They're looking for the wildness, and the moors with the wildness is within themselves. Heathcliff is within us all. So is Cathy. I miss that. It was like they existed upon the wind. She says sometimes there's too much interest in life. It scared her when people started to wanted a piece of them. Although the moors are open for people, she's saying sometimes people can be too intrusive. She said the best way to walk those moors is with an open heart, not wanting to see their ghost, not wanting to see the spirit, not wanting to see a bit of them, but to walk on those moors and find their own spirit, find their own shadow, find their own wild wind, and not want to find their wild wind. To go to Haworth and the Bronte part to find themselves, not to find them. She's wanted me to explain that there are some people out there that have said that, I know one of the things she did say was that she was Asperger's, or that she was on that Asperger's spectrum. And she explained the other day that many people were on the Asperger's spectrum back then, and how she described it was, and again, disclaimer everybody, because villages married, the same village remarried and remarried and remarried. Whereas now you could be in Leeds and you could marry somebody in Manchester. You could be in Liverpool and marry somebody in Scotland. Back then they married their own. She said the bloodline became very damaged. And a result of that was Asperger's-like behaviour. I know she's talking about herself had Asperger's-like behaviour. She said they weren't as history's making them a lot wilder than what they were. She said, but they just had common complaints that have been blown out of all proportion, that a lot of people had that Asperger's way about them. She said, and it's still in bloodlines now, but it's going to be neutralised out. And she's also saying she's sorry if the book offended. She's reminded me to say that there are rumours that Branwell, sorry that's maybe quite emotional, that it was Branwell that wrote Wuthering Heights. She said it was us both. She said we both, she said, and now she said she prays for a day where his name can be placed on that book. And next to her she says, but it won't be. But she wants people to know that he helped her with that book. She said, even in the times when he couldn't actually sit with her, he helped her by who he was, the examples of what he brought in, and that without Branwell they probably wouldn't have been Wuthering Heights, and that he should have been given his rightful place in history because he actually brought a lot to the girls, to the women, to us, to Haworth, to the memories, to the Bronte name. But it was easy to wipe him out and to focus on them because they were the producers. So yes, Branwell did help her with that book. She said this is the importance of not going down the route of drink because it diminished his ability. He was left in a position where he couldn't do what we were doing because of the drink. The drink took over. She said so many people are losing themselves in drink and losing those abilities that if only they could just have belief in themselves. He was also an example of people that lack the self-belief. Yeah, that rain. actually really enjoyed doing this without the cards and without the incense and just being real. Not that the cards are not real and the incense are not real, but it's like sometimes we rely too much on what the cards say, don't we? And the incense and the ambience. And this is a soul that was very real, very earthy. You know, she lived in Haworth. She lived in the Victorian times, Haworth. That's it. That's it. I understand now why. Because they didn't need to tell that. We're becoming too externally stimulated. Whereas that passion, those stories came from within them. Externally, but went within them, came through within them. You know, she needed a quill, was it a quill, and some paper and the moors. She didn't need an Apple computer. She didn't need a tablet. She didn't need a phone. She didn't need an office space. She just needed the bare basics. Bare basics. Is that where we're losing ourselves as a species, where we just need the bare basics? Should we see if she has anything else to say? Like she just sat watching us. She did say, I think it was yesterday, that she was actually there when we got engaged. She was watching. She said, I thought, they'll be good together. Sorry. She said, I thought, they'll be good together and they're not possessed like my Cathy and Heathcliff. They won't rip each other apart. She said there are so many Cathy and Heathcliffs out there at the minute that are ripping each other apart, that are tormenting each other. Do stop. Do stop. We will close down now. So I'm asking my chief to come to the side of her. She's going to stay on the moors for a bit longer, but the door is open to go through when she's ready. He's actually closing this down by giving us all some healing from this session. And healing to her as well. And light to Branwell. I enjoyed that. I really enjoyed that. And it does go to show that you don't need overstimulation. None of us, the light, it's bothering me, is that like, but I shouldn't be bothered by the light. If it does appearing really bright and lit up, I'm glad I've done that. I realised why I was feeling so, because it's such a big thing, and that you think Emily Bronte, but she's within us all. And I hope people take something from that, as in about, you know, not drowning. I used to drown my sorrows, which is another example. And I said I had similar situations around. Well, I used to drown my sorrows before I'd come on my healing path. So it is important to be able to heal. And now I very, very rarely drink, And I'm not smug sober. I'm not one of these that you smug. You know, I will now and again have the odd tipple, but I know my boundaries, and I very rarely do it. But I did lose myself in what Branwell lost himself in the drink. Not to the extent that Branwell did, but there's a Branwell within all of us, isn't there? There's a fine line between one glass and a Branwell. You know, and if only we could learn by those people on the world stage and learn by their mistakes. Get creative, have faith, hold your light, love each other. And just let that rain come in and wash us away. Let's enjoy this weekend with this rain coming in, this wildness. That's the thing as well, we run from the wildness, don't we? Oh, it's raining. Oh, embrace the rain, embrace the wind, embrace the elements, embrace the wildness within yourself. Embrace it, release it. Hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please like and subscribe. And I will catch you all on Monday. Have a great weekend, and I will see you all later. Bye.